Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if one person has their moon in Scorpio and the other has their moon in Aquarius. And what are those emotional dynamics? I have been doing these moon sign combinations because I feel like they deserve to be looked at in and of themselves rather than always talking about the sun and the moon and all that kind of thing. Because sometimes you can have a basic affinity for someone or with someone, and then the emotional sides of your nature kind of clash. And, it's interesting that I use the word clash because these two signs form a square, Aquarius and Scorpio. Of course, technically they have to be within a certain number of degrees to officially be a square to one another, but just by virtue of the signs themselves and what they represent, the elements, we can see how there can be that tension, which is what a square represents. The obstacles that form. And I think that fixed squares are particularly difficult because there's a stubborn quality to them. So both people, it's like they want their own way. It's not that fixed signs are controlling of others necessarily. It's more like they are trying to control, or they want to be able to do what they want to do in their own time, in their own way. They don't want somebody else trying to impose certain things on them because they're not really open to change that much. They have very rigid kind of ideas, and especially with the moon position, because the moon represents the conditioned responses. So it's already crystallized, and this just adds fuel to the fire in that sense. So the person with the moon in Scorpio, and we can also look at it in terms of the way that they express and feel emotions, in other words, take them in, and also their relationship to their mother. Okay, so these are very important things because the mother represents the nurturing aspect of the individual. And sometimes they may feel like they didn't get enough nurturing, and then that can really play into a person's attitude in a relationship about how they navigate the relationship, what they're asking for. They may be asking too much of another person when they feel like they haven't received what they needed. So in this particular case, what we're looking at here is with the Scorpio person, the moon in Scorpio is notoriously difficult. At least I'm making it notoriously difficult. Because the person is coming from heavy emotions. Definitely look to your sun sign to get a better feel on how this is all playing out. For instance, if somebody has their sun in Libra, this is going to be very distressing because the emotions that they feel are on the shadow side, and emotions themselves, can run the gamut. But with the moon in Scorpio, because Scorpio represents the shadow, they will tend to revolve around the rage somebody feels, the vengeance, really along with that comes vengeful feelings. In other words, wanting to get back at somebody or have them experience the pain that they experienced. And that can be pronounced, especially if the sun is in Libra, because Libra's obsessed with fairness. And if somebody has gotten away with abusing them, they can just feel like this is so unfair. Life is so unfair. And that can make them rather bitter, or just that discomfort that comes from feeling that things are not as they should be. But just in general, that feelings of envy, the more having experienced trauma that affected them deeply. Control issues are big with Scorpio. And speaking of that, so the mother may have been all consuming, like vampiric. Is that how you pronounce it? Kind of like an emotional vampire, feeding off of her young, in that way, and invading their space, the person's space, trying to siphon energy. So that's what we say, the energy vampire. But that obsession, sometimes that obsession from the mother is coming from a competitive quality. Especially if it's a girl, a female, she may be competing with her daughter for being attractive to men, all of that. And that's quite a psychodrama of its own. So there can be very feelings of kind of fear towards the mother, love-hate relationships with this placement. And so this person, when they're going into relationships, they're going to have trust issues 9 times out of 10, I would say, because they've already experienced a violation of some sort. And if this is a male, somebody brought up a really important point, and I think it was about the moon in Scorpio, or the moon in conjunction with Pluto, probably, which is a similar vibe, where the mother makes the son into her husband, whether it's, really incestuous or not. It's emotional incest, and tries to make her husband, and then he feels guilty for breaking away from her, either by dating as a teenager, or going off to college, or living on his own as an adult. So that's an attempt to control as well. And then if he's heterosexual, he's going to feel kind of ambivalent about women in general. So some of these men who we think of as misogynistic, they may have had this kind of negative relationship with a woman, namely their own mother. And so they are very cynical about women in general. They kind of overgeneralize. And, anyway, so that psychodrama is going on. And then you look at the person with the moon in Aquarius and where they're coming from. And it's funny because it can be the opposite end of the spectrum. They can be coming from a mother who was maybe very detached from being a maternal type of a figure. She was more in her head. She was treating the child sometimes as a little adult and talking to them as a peer instead of as, acknowledging that they were a child. And the child may feel like they are not being nurtured. So, depending on other factors like the sun sign, if the sun sign is in Sagittarius, it may not be bad at all, especially if the mother's giving them a lot of freedom, letting them make up their own mind about things. That can be that progressive type of household, and the child can really take to it. But children that are more in need of that, extra type of care that is given, they can feel that sense of not getting what they need. So, like if the sun is in Cancer or Scorpio or Pisces, the child may feel, I don't know about Scorpio, that's always kind of it's more of an outlier for the water signs. But we'll just say Pisces and Cancer, just in particular. But I mean, it could be any sign to some degree, but the person may feel like they were left to their own devices too much, and then they're looking for a person who's going to really shower them with attention. And this is the dangerous part. Somebody who is controlling may initially be seen in a positive light because that person is, or I should say obsessive, because that person is paying so much attention to them. It feels like such a breath of fresh air until it doesn't, until the person realizes that it's being done for the purposes of control. So you can see how these two people can meet up and they can feel like they're getting their needs met. The person who has the moon in Scorpio may be initially attracted to somebody who has a more detached emotional nature, but they don't realize that that detachment may be an inability to bond, an inability to form an intimate emotional connection with somebody. And then they are left high and dry because they're looking for that. The moon in Scorpio is terrified of that kind of feeding off their emotions, but by the same token, they're desiring a very deep emotional experience with another person. So it's one of those things. It's like a fine line to tread because it's very easy to get into the area of extremes. Now, how do you bridge the gap? The person who has the moon in Scorpio has to acknowledge their shadow self, and they have to acknowledge their obsessive nature. In some cases, like I said, with Libra sun, with all of the air sign suns in particular, there can be a disconnect, and it can really get put under the radar. And their conscious mind, because their conscious mind rejects that and says, I'm not like that, they could be in denial of how they are being like this, and it's hard for them to face facts about what they're doing. And I would say that it's not anyone's job to kind of convince somebody of what they're doing, but it can be very helpful to show people how what they're doing is, when you're in the moment, if you love somebody who has the moon in Scorpio and you have the moon in Aquarius, you can say, see that emotion, that thing that you're doing right now, like you giving me the third degree, you asking me, giving me the third degree, but you're mum about your own feelings, that's not okay. You have to stop being like that. You have to stop trying to micromanage me through calling me 5 times a day to try to figure out where I am because you're suspicious. You have an overly suspicious nature. You're afraid of abandonment. And you really, the person with the moon in Aquarius can be quite astute in their analysis of their partner. And sometimes you might see somebody with the sun in Scorpio having the moon in Aquarius and being attracted to a sun in, and being attracted to somebody with the moon in Scorpio just because they're familiar with that Scorpio nature. And by the way, I'm not saying that any of these permutations cannot work. It's just that there have to be adjustments, obviously. when you have this dynamic going on. The person with the moon in Scorpio may find that that moon in Aquarius person is cutting them off when they feel, just suddenly becoming abrupt. And that can be very chilling almost because it comes without warning. But if you can, let them know that they're doing and I do think that there are certain circumstances where this can play out. Maybe you're dating somebody and everything is going great, and then all of a sudden, when it's time to be monogamous with one another, have that deeper level of commitment, that's when they ghost you. That's when they shut down. And if you can let them know, look, you're afraid. We're getting along great. You know that we're compatible, but you have to, transcend your fears, because if you don't, you'll never be able to form a deep relationship with another person. But you have to be able to communicate your insights without being forceful, without being manipulative. There is a very strong, profound ability with the moon in Scorpio to be able to understand human nature, what makes people tick. And the lower expression of moon in Scorpio can use that as a weapon against people to kind of get inside their head, manipulate them, to give them what they want. And of course, that is not okay. We should never do that to other people. But just sharing your valuable insight can help that person get a handle on their patterns. The moon and Aquarius person, and it's sometimes two people aren't meant to be together, and that's perfectly fine. But it's not a good thing to just ghost somebody, leave them, not tell them why you feel that way. There's nothing wrong with telling somebody that you don't feel that they have enough in common or that their temperaments are too different. It's a lot better than just leaving them wondering, completely like what's going on. So if you are a moon and Aquarius person and you tend to do that, you tend to feel very awkward or uncomfortable, like actually expressing your feelings when they're on the more challenging side, then that's going to be something you have to work on. And also just expressing positive feelings, being able to say, I love you. A moon and Scorpio person will likely have no problem with that. The moon and Aquarius person might. And that might be a bone of contention too. So because these are both fixed signs, it could turn into this battle of the wills. Like who's going to cave and accept the other person? So very, very interesting. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.